This is a Sports Radio Live podcast covering your world of sports. Bryan Houston's Sports Radio Live. It's weekdays at 3 on 99.3 Talk FM, the talk of East Texas.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Bryan. Thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Bryan, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a great story today, too. I really enjoyed that.
Great, thank you.
All right, as soon as he gives me the high sign, we'll knock this thing out. All right, here we go. Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com, writing for deadspin.com, is Rob Trucks. How you doing, Rob?
I'm good. How are you, Bryan?
Doing very well. Thank you for coming on with us. I saw on Deadspin the series of articles, at least the first of a series of articles, I believe, entitled Tell Me When It's Over, and the topic was on David Clyde, a very familiar and tragic figure in these parts for what happened to him coming out of high school and going straight to the Texas Rangers. Tell me a little bit about the series of articles you're doing and what this is all about, first of all.
Well, I had actually traveled through your area briefly about 10 years ago when I was doing a book called Cup of Coffee. I kind of went searching for modern Moonlight Grahams, guys that had pitched in the major leagues less than 50 innings. And one of the things that struck me with all of their stories is how tough that transition is from being a professional athlete to having that playing career be over. I mean, as bad as losing a job is, they lose a job, they lose an identity. A lot of these guys have been singled out for good or bad ever since they were children. And so all of a sudden you get to your late 20s, early 30s, and the one thing that you can do better than anybody else, the one thing that you've been able to do your entire life, is now the one thing that you're not allowed to do anymore. So that's really what got the series started.
And what made you decide to write about David Clyde?
Well, I think David Clyde, for any true baseball fan, is one of those very, very intriguing figures where his fame, his notoriety is certainly greater than the on-field performance would lead you to believe. I mean, this was a guy that got written about by Sports Illustrated, and deservedly so, several times. And as we put in the title, David Clyde is pretty much the dictionary definition of a cautionary tale at this point.
Yeah, coming out of high school, the number one pick in 1973, he has the misfortune of being drafted by an absolutely horrible baseball team in the Texas Rangers, a team that at that time had just moved to Texas. They couldn't pay people to come to the ball games, and they threw this poor kid out there, and literally a guy that may have had a Hall of Fame career had he been, handled like your average number one pick, ends up flaming out way too soon because of it. It's just horrible, the thing what they did to this kid.
Yes, it's absolutely wise. But, I'm not sure who you point the finger at. David points the finger at Billy Martin. Most of the outside observers points the finger at the Rangers owner, Bob Short. The gist of the situation is David's drafted. The Rangers had averaged less than 10,000 people per game before David's drafted. The night he pitches, they go north of 30,000. It's more than a sellout. They have to turn 10,000 people away from the ballpark. The next night, they only get 6,000 people show up. So the draw is absolutely David Clyde. And if you're the owner and if you are hemorrhaging money and you're trying to get people to come see your ball club so you can remain in business, you keep David Clyde up there. But, of course, we know now that's not what you do to an 18-year-old kid. You don't feed him to the lions right off the bat. So, it's kind of a bad situation all the way around.
And the worst thing, a lot of people around here still say the worst thing that could have happened is that he goes out there and pitches pretty well and wins that first game, and that may have been the worst thing that could have happened to him.
Well, I don't know that I guess with that logic is if David goes and he can't get through the second inning,
right?
Maybe they send him down. Maybe they ignore all the money and they send him down immediately. Certainly, whatever needed to be done so he could go and pitch against batters his own skill level, his own maturity level, would have been the thing to do. It's not that David's arm burnt out or they put too much work on him, but he was playing against a higher level of competition than he should have been, and he completely lost every bit of confidence he had going in the situation. I mean, imagine if you were a 6-year-old kid and, you decided to go play a college tennis player. It's hard to have fun. It's hard to feel good about yourself if you're getting skunked 6-love.
Sure. When you talk to David Clyde, what is his frame of mind now about the way things were handled and just the lack of fortune he had in his career?
Well, David, I think, is, with a certain amount of hindsight, obviously, in reflection, David's quite proud of being able to play in the major leagues. As he pointed out, and this happened probably when he was in his 40s and he had already been out of the game maybe 15 years, but he had heard on a radio station somebody talking about less than 20,000 people in the history of Major League Baseball have ever played in the majors. Half of those are pitchers. And so when you're looking at 125, 130 years of history and getting to be one of those 10,000 people chosen to play at the highest level, he's quite proud of that. He's quite proud of the fact that pitchers like Steven Strasburg for the Washington Nationals are treated a certain way because no one wants David Clyde's situation to ever happen again. So he's actually quite accepting and a lot less bitter than, say, somebody a little less mature like myself would be in that same situation.
Well, it's amazing now. He's in his late 50s now, and he's coaching baseball at an academy down in Houston now. Is that right?
He is. It's a private Christian organization, travel team baseball. What he would like to do is coach on the professional level, and that's a twofold reason. David did not get 4 years in on the major league rosters, and so he's actually short of what at the time was fully vested into the major league system. Now they've talked to the Players Association. Guys that don't have the full 4 years are getting some money, but he's not fully vested, so he would like to spend another 50 days with a professional organization. And I also think he would appreciate the challenge of getting to work with, older pitchers, pitchers with a little bit more talent, a little bit more skill. He's been coaching baseball at the travel team level for, I think, more than a decade, and so I think he's ready to kind of move up while he's got some years ahead of him. And also, he wouldn't mind, having the full pension like most people in their late 50s are thinking about.
Yeah, Rob Trucks with Deadspin on the article on David Clyde that's on Deadspin.com. One of the things that I thought was even more criminal that was pointed out in the article that you wrote, Rob, was the part where the Rangers use him up and then basically don't even want to pay the guy when his arm goes out and he's got to have shoulder surgery, and he has to use basically all the money, what little bit of money he made in the major leagues, basically to pay for his surgery.
Yeah, he gets injured, has a bum arm, a sore arm. Normally we see sore arms as overused. There seems to be a question about whether or not he was on the Rangers payroll at the time, and so they didn't want to pay his doctor bill. They just paid his salary and cut him loose. And, it makes me think of when Jeff Kent, who had near Hall of Fame numbers, got injured a few years ago, and I think everybody in the world knew that he had been injured riding his motorcycle, including the team that was paying him. And so it's, do you refuse to pay him because he was injured doing something he was contractually obligated not to do, and run the risk of him being mad at you and never playing for you again, or do you kind of look the other way and give him the check? And whereas Jeff Kent received looking the other way. I think we've now changed the story to I hurt myself washing my car. He gets the full paycheck, which is millions and millions of dollars. David Clyde, on the other hand, is on the back end of his career, and he's simply cut loose.
Yeah. Who else did you talk to for this series of articles?
Well, we did during the NCAA tournament. We interviewed former heroes of March Madness, basketball players like George Lynch from North Carolina and Jeff Shepard, who was an MVP for the University of Kentucky. And then this is the third in a series of our baseball players. We started with Dr. Mike Marshall, who was the first relief pitcher to win a Cy Young Award. And then a couple of weeks ago, we ran a piece with Ron Darling, and David Clyde's our third.
Okay, and who's coming up next?
Coming up next is either Jay Bell, who scored the winning run in the 2001 World Series for the Diamondbacks, or we may wait on Jay. The NBA draft is coming up later on this month, and I interviewed Danny Manning, who's now the head coach at Tulsa and a former #1 overall draft pick, and I also talked to Spencer Haywood, who was not a #1 overall draft pick, but has changed the legalities of who can be drafted and who can play in the NBA, basically in history. The reason we can see Anthony Davis and his 4 teammates from the University of Kentucky to come and be one and done is because of Spencer Haywood.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating topic, and like I said, for those of us who are have been Ranger fans for a long time, pretty familiar with David Clyde's situation, but it's definitely to read some of the things and to get more of the details of both how they used him when they brought him up, and then to see how they treated him on the way out. It just kind of makes it even more of a tragic tale, and definitely one of the things I see here is the caption underneath his baseball card where he talked about wanting to leave a mark, and his was how not to handle young talent. It's a great article.
Well, I thank you very much for saying so, and of course very much appreciate you having me on to visit with you.
And where can people read all your other stuff? I know you have a website as well as the stuff that you post on Deadspin, right?
I do have a website. It's Tusk, as in elephant tusk, 3 times. I've also, my last book was on Fleetwood Mac's Tusk album.
Nice.
But I'm fairly regular on Deadspin, and reading stuff for free is always a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is. Hey, Rob, we really do appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks very much, and we'll keep looking for your writings there. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Brian. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Rob Trucks from Deadspin and Tusk.com. I'm Bryan Houston, Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM.
This is a Sports Radio Live podcast covering your world of sports. Bryan Houston, Sports Radio Live. It's weekdays at 3 on 99.3 Talk FM, the talk of East Texas.